And here we come to the end of the story. You have internalization advantages. What are internalization advantages? Are those that derive from producing within hierarchies rather than via the markets. Okay, so basically are all those factors that allow a firm to bypass external markets and the transaction cost associated with them, and that makes, in particular, that makes it convenient for the company to internalize these activities. What are the examples of factors that creates internalization advantages? Well, for instance, there can be two. One is related to the existence of public intervention that make market particularly imperfect. So if you operate in a market that is, so the more you move in a market that is far from perfect competition, the more you can have internalization advantage. And this may explain why a firm that wants to expand the business and operates in this kind of markets may find it convenient to do so via foreign direct investments, which implies internalization as opposed, for instance, to subcontracting. Another aspect that can make it, that can create internalization advantage are, for instance, the existence of common policies among countries, which may increase internalization advantage. Here, the example again is tax competition. So the fact that taxes are not the same across all countries, and in some countries you can have lower taxes than others, can create some sort of an advantage in terms of internalization, because you may want to internalize an activities that is located in a country just because that country applies to that activity a lower tax rate compared to your home country. So in this sense, you want to exploit the tax differential between countries in order to increase your profits. Okay. Again, there are several examples that can be made about this. Now, the interesting thing about the OLI approach is that these type of advantages are not just given, but there is a very strong interaction among them. Okay, so for instance, you can have both internalization and ownership advantages. For instance, when this happens. When does this happen? It happens when a firm decides to internalize, to acquire or increase those assets that give the firm an ownership advantage. Okay, so for instance, suppose that the firm based its ownership advantage on the access of cheap suppliers of inputs. Okay, on access on cheap inputs, and the company find another company in China that is producing that product, that inputs at a very low cost, the firm may decide to internalize that activity, meaning to acquire control over this Chinese company, just because so there is an internalization advantage, because, for instance, you operate in a sector in which there are lots of market imperfections. So the use of the price mechanism to acquire that, to buy that product, that inputs via the market is very high. So you have an internalization advantage, but thanks to this, but to exploit this internalization advantage allows you also to increase even further your ownership advantage based on the access of cheap inputs. Okay, so there is an interaction between these two factors. Same can be the interaction between location and internalization advantage. For instance, the fact that you decide to acquire control over this company, over this Chinese company supplying the inputs via foreign direct investments, is partly due to the fact, once again, that you operate in a sector that makes it very costly to use the price mechanism, so to use the market mechanism. But it can also be due to the fact that in that area there is a very good networks of transportation and communication. So there is a location advantage that increases even further your internalization advantage. Okay, so of course you can think about all possible interactions among these different types of advantages, but the interesting part of this argument is that all these factors are combined together. Okay. Now, Having said that, what are the conditions for foreign direct investment to take place? First of all, the firm must possess net ownership advantages vis-à-vis firm of other nationalities in serving a particular market. Okay, so why a firm decides to undertake the foreign direct investments? Because the firm has an ownership advantage that comes from acquiring control of one particular asset. Okay, the firm decides to acquire the Chinese company because having control of this company increases your ownership advantages. Okay, so this is why you decide to do this. Now, then the second question is how you want to say get control over this foreign company via simply a kind of licensing agreements or via foreign direct investments. Well, the firm, in order for the foreign direct investment to take place, the firm must have a clear benefit from internalizing the use of this resource. So you must operate in a sector that makes, for the foreign direct investment to take place, you must operate in a sector that makes the use of the market mechanism very costly, and therefore it makes it convenient to internalize this activity. This explains how you decide to do it. So they say why you use foreign direct investments. The third factor is that the country where the foreign direct investment takes place must offer special location advantages. So you decide to acquire that company in China not only because this improves your ownership advantage, but also you decide to do this exactly there and not in another, acquire the control over another company producing a similar input in Romania, because in China there is a specific location advantage. For instance, a very well organized network of distribution and communication. Okay? So these three things explain the why, the how, and the where foreign direct investments take place. Now, I wanted to show you also this empirical paper, but it's already almost 4, so I will skip this. So the idea basically was just to show you how, to show you that this approach, the OLI approach, is also used in recent research in order to study the drivers of foreign direct investment. So basically what you can do, why you can do this, because it is a very simple framework that is very easy to apply to empirical research. Basically, suppose that you get data about different types of foreign direct investments, you can sort of try to correlate this foreign direct investment to some characteristics that you observe at the regional level or at the firm level or on other factors. And this paper by Ascani, Crescenzi, and Gianmarino that was published in 2016 is actually doing exactly this, and they tried in particular to identify what are the main factors that creates location advantages. Okay, so what are the factors that explain the facts that firms invest in one location as opposed to another? Are these mainly related to institutions, or are these mainly related to regulation, or to infrastructures and things like that? And the results that is interesting that they find, I mean, I am not going into the details, so let me just summarize it, is that, for instance, labor market regulation that oftentimes are considered, especially in the press, as an important factors that affects the decision to invest in a country rather than another. In particular, the argument that is always made is that if you want to attract foreign direct investment, you need to have a labor market that is very flexible, because this allows firm to sort of like reduce the cost of wages, and this makes it therefore convenient for company to go there and producing. What they find is that at least at the European level, this is not true. Okay, so in reality, the type of market regulations does not explain much in terms of attraction of foreign direct investments, and other factors related to, for instance, to availability of a network of universities or other more knowledge-related factors are instead much more important as driver of, as attractor of foreign direct investment. So basically, to summarize, it's much more knowledge-related factors that creates location advantage rather than just institutional or labor or institution, in particular institution related to labor market regulation.